All right, this is going to be part 4 here of Chapter 33. Again, hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. All right, we're going to start with the next bullet point here being a new deal for labor. A couple of big things I want you to make sure that you have down for this section is the Wagner Act, the National Labor Relations Act of 1935. The Wagner Act was important because it guaranteed the right of unions to organize and to collectively bargain with management. Again, the Wagner Act guaranteed the right of unions to organize and collectively bargain with management. Also important for the New Deal for Labor was the Committee for Industrial Organizations. They were a group that started within the AFL, or the American Federations of Labor, but later split. Of course, they had a victory in a dispute with General Motors. They did a sit-down strike. And they also won again versus U.S. Steel. So the CIO becomes a pretty big labor union during this time. Also, a couple other things for a New Deal for Labor you want to have down. The Fair Labor Standards Act. Fair Labor Standards Act. It set a minimum wage. So a minimum wage. It also set a maximum working hours. And it forbade children under 16 from working. So minimum wage, maximum working hours, and forbade children under 16 from working. That was, of course, the Fair Labor Standards Act. Union membership, not surprisingly, during this time shoots up under FDR. All right, next point here I want to talk about is Landon challenging the champ. Landon challenging the champ. 1936, Alfred M. Landon, the governor of Kansas, he ran for the presidency here, and of course, the main thing you have to know is he did not run a very effective campaign, and FDR absolutely spanked him. FDR won 523 to 8 in the electoral vote category. And, of course, people claim that FDR won because he never forgot the forgotten man. Good. Moving along here to 9 old men on the bench. 9 old men on the bench should be your next major point here. In January 29th, 1937, the 20th Amendment kind of cut the lame duck period to 6 weeks. So that's something that was in this section that you should know about. Remember that even though the Democrats controlled the Congress, by and large, the Supreme Court was very conservative. And so FDR, in all of his grand schemes, proposed increasing the Supreme Court to perhaps 15 justices, giving 1 justice adding to the bench for every justice over the age of 70. Now, he claimed that this was to help get stuff taken care of within the federal court system. However, we all know that FDR also was upset because a lot of his New Deal policies were not being passed the way he wanted to see them be passed. So Congress, this was like the first time when FDR proposed this increase of the Supreme Court that Congress decides that they are going to say no, this is a little bit too far. They didn't want FDR to get too much power. Also, this court packing scheme that FDR has kind of been using here, it kind of runs into a couple of obstacles, as well as just having criticisms from both Republicans and Democrats. He was not only accused of becoming a dictator, he was also, the court itself had seen this transformation. Owen J. Roberts started to vote more liberal, and so we also have some justices being replaced during this time period. In fact, the Supreme Court actually holds up the Wagner Act and the Social Security Act. And so even though the Supreme Court was never expanded like FDR wanted, and he took a pretty big political hit, which is important because it ends up kind of being the end of the New Deal, the thing was he still got what he wanted. A lot of his New Deal laws were considered constitutional, and so at the end of the day, FDR could kind of consider that a little bit of a victory, even though it really wasn't. All right, next bullet point here. Twilight of the New Deal. Twilight of the New Deal. Important thing to understand about the New Deal, the New Deal did not necessarily make the Depression go away. We still had 25% unemployment, or we had 25% unemployment in 1932 and 15% in 1937, which is still very, very high. The economy also took a downturn in 1937. This is known as Roosevelt's Recession. This happened for a couple of reasons. Number one, Social Security was cutting into people's take-home pay, and so they had less spending power. So again, these are reasons why the Roosevelt Recession occurred. Number one is that the Social Security tax was cutting into people's take-home pay. Also, FDR has started to cut back on some spending because he wanted to balance the budget. And so it was around this time that FDR, when the Roosevelt Recession was taking place, that he bought into the idea of heavy spending. This is John Maynard Keynes, or Keynesian economics, Keynesian, Keynesian economics. Basically what Keynesian economics says is it's okay, even good, for a government to engage in deficit spending. So they spend more than they take in. This helps to provide a little bit of a jump start to the economy. All right. Let's talk real quick about New Deal or a raw deal here. I think we'll make it our last bullet point. I'll make two more bullet points. New Deal or raw deal. Many critics of the New Deal said that it was a lot of waste and a little bit of accomplishment. FDR was criticized for moving America away from the laissez-faire capitalism and moving it more towards the socialism, communism, Marxism that people thought was important. We doubled our debt basically from 1932, where we had $19 billion in debt, to 1939, where we had $40 billion. Some people criticized FDR for not going far enough. Other people said he was just giving handouts from the government to people. The New Deal may have helped the U.S. not go into any further of a depression. However, ultimately, we all know that at the end of the day, World War II is what kind of saved America from really continuing on and kind of pulled us out altogether. FDR's balance sheet here, last point for Chapter 33. Many of FDR's supporters said again that the Depression would have been far worse had he not been elected. And FDR was hated by capitalists due to his taxation policies. He was also disliked by socialists. Many people said that he kind of cut out socialism because of his reforms. There wasn't anything for them to argue. Basically what FDR did was, in a time where there was a lot of challenges, he tried new things. And he always tried to make sure that he took care of the forgotten man. And of course, his greatest leadership perhaps was not even the New Deal, but what he did during World War II, which is what we'll talk about in Chapters 34 and 35. All right, that's it for Chapter 33. If you have any questions, please see me.